Hello. Hi.
Hello. Good evening, all. Welcome. I want to explore with you the very complicated relationship between Rivka and Esau, Rebecca and Esau. It's complicated. It's very complex. It's a mother and a son, where they're estranged. If you read the story very superficially, it's a story of favoritism and betrayal. But that doesn't sound right. It's got to run deeper than that. So, as we're exposed to the characters of Esau, that's a redhead, and Yaakov, and their distinct personality develop early on in life, we're told by the verse that their preferences, that Yitzchak liked Esau, and it says the reason for this is he had a taste for game, kitzayid befiv. Commentary says, well, he was also kind of a hunter, even with his mouth. In other words, not just he enjoyed good food, or he was able to bring good food to his father, but that he was able to also entrap him, like a hunter would. Rivka hebet Yaakov, and Rivka loves Yaakov. And if you just read the superficially, well, yeah. So, case of favoritism, the one parent likes the one child, and the other one likes the other. And Rivka's got a favorite, and Yitzchak has got his favorite, and of course, there's all that trouble. Of course, this comes to a head many years later. This is now when Yitzchak is going to bless his firstborn son, and he's concerned that he's not going to be alive for much longer. He's at the age of 125 years before his mother's death, so 122, 123. And that means the twins who were born when he was 60 are now 63. And so not little kids. And at that point, he, as we know, calls over Esau and says to him, I want to bless you. He's the firstborn, and just, it's correct that he should pass on the blessings he was given and the leadership of the chosen nation onto his eldest son. And so he's going to be blessing, well, Esau, and we all know what happens, because as he calls over Esau and says, please go out to the field, hunt some food, bring it back, and then I will bless you before I pass on. Rivka has overheard this, and she then says to her son, you go, you misrepresent yourself, go there, and pretend that you are Esau, you'll bring it to your father, and you will get the blessing. So it would seem that, this is where the betrayal takes place. And of course, he goes ahead, he does this, and he's caught out, and then it gets really complicated. Then it gets really complex because of course, Esau hates him, and the rest literally is history. But we need to kind of start scratching beneath the surface. How does a mother hate the son, choose a favorite, and betray her own child? She went as far as taking garments that belonged to Esau, that he hadn't trusted her, and she gives it to Yaakov for him to wear so he can, feel the Esau part better. What does it mean? Most importantly, I mean, if she really felt that it was correct for the husband to bless Esau, then sit down with him, offer him a cup of tea, and say, let's chat. You want to bless Esau, but do you realize, who he is, what he represents, and why Yaakov is a far better candidate? All the commentaries talk about. There's a lot of interpretations to the story. I want to offer you one, which really is based on understanding the relationship between the mother and son, the elder son, or Esau in this case. Ababanel poses the question, and he kind of puts a series of 8 questions, I think, on this whole story of the blessing. And he says, why did she want to steal the blessing from Esau if it was rightfully his? But even more so, how did you think this would work? A blessing has got a destination. You can't just redirect it. Even if the visible recipient of the blessing standing in front of you is another, and you're not aware of it, but you're directing your blessing at a particular person. You don't necessarily have to bless somebody in the presence, though that might be better. So how did she think that by substituting Yaakov at that point, she would actually make the blessings kind of divert and go to him? But if we start to scratch beneath the surface of what is the relationship between Esau and Rivka, and I'm going to give you kind of two clues from verses that follow the story of the blessings that are going to show that it's not she had a favorite and she hated Esau and she betrayed him, but that she actually was worrying about him as much as she was worrying about Yaakov when she made those major decisions that would affect history. So, of course, Esau hears that the blessing has been received by Yaakov, and he is far from impressed. And the Torah tells us that he hates Yaakov over this. And he makes it very clear, even though the Torah says he said it in his heart. I'm going to said to himself, but he must have said it to himself loud enough for other people to overhear it, because of course Rivka hears about this and she says, your brother is planning to kill you, and what you need to do is you need to leave, you need to run away and go to Lavan. That's my brother. He's in Haran, that's back in Mesopotamia. Stay with him, she says, for a while. Well, it ends up being decades, until your brother's fury subsides. And when that happens, and he's able to kind of let go and forget what you've done, then I will send for you. And then here are some very powerful prophetic words. She says, Lama eshkal gam shneichem yom echad. Let me not lose you both in one day. And I'm going to come back to that, but just remember that sentence. Why should I lose you both in one day? She then has to convince her husband to send him away. Yitzchak is okay with the plan. It would seem that she doesn't tell him that there's intended murder. She says, I really don't like the marriage choices that Esau made, nor do you. He's married locals. We don't want Yitzchak doing the same. We don't want him marrying a local, just as your father sent Eliezer back home to find me. I think we should send Yitzchak back home. There is Lavan, that's my brother, and there he's going to find a wife. So Yitzchak agrees, and off goes Yaakov. And it tells us he went to Padan Aram, he went to Lavan, and Lavan is the son of Betuel, who is the brother of Rivka, mother of Yaakov and Esau. And that's how the story of this very tense episode comes to an end. The last words are that Rivka is the mother of Yaakov and Esau, which is kind of superfluous information, stuff we already know. And Rashi comments and says, I don't know what the additions of this word is intended to tell us. Mother of Jacob and Esau. We know this. We've known this already for 63 years, that she's been the mother of Esau and Yaakov. Why suddenly is that repeated? According to Pshat, according to the literal, most direct meaning of the verse, which is the approach that Rashi takes when he interprets verses of the Torah, yes, it doesn't seem to make sense. But here is a commentary called Chizkuni. And Chizkuni says the following, and this puts a completely different spin on the relationship between Rivka and Esau. The reason why it mentions that she's the mother of Rivka and Esau is, as we finish the story, for us to know that she was the mother of both all the way through, and that what she did all the way through, even the blessing, even the subterfuge, even the substitution of Yaakov for Esau, was for the benefit of both of the children. And when she finishes so tragically, why would I have to lose both my children in one day? She's saying, this was done with the best interest of both in mind. We need to understand how what Rivka did would have been in their best interest. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead to the death of Rivka. And that is recorded. This is years later. Yaakov has gone on and spent decades in the home of Lavan. There's also a discrepancy where there seems to be some unaccounted for years, which the Medrash tells us is where he spent the year studying in hiding in the study halls of Shem and Ever. And eventually he leaves Lavan, and while he's on his way home, and that is in Beit El, which is, of course, back in Israel, back in Canaan. There, Devorah, who is the nursemaid of Rivka, dies, and she's buried, it says, under the oak tree in Beit El, not the one in the Pumalanga, the one there just north of Jerusalem, and the tree is named Alon Bachut, the tree of mourning, the tree of crying. Why suddenly would the Torah tell us about the death of Rivka's nurse? So Rashi says, based on Genesis Bereshit Rabbah, that it actually is a reference to another mourning that happened. And the word for oak is alon, which in Greek means another, because her mother had died. Rivka herself had died. And that is alluded to, hinted to, by talking about the death of Devorah. The death seemed to have been fairly close in time. The time of her death was kept a secret, so that people might not curse the mother gave birth to Esau. So scripture doesn't make open mention of her death. Those allude to it. So why is there an allusion to a death rather than open mention? I mean, it doesn't always mention the death of every great person. Sarah's death is mentioned, Rivka's death is not mentioned, but it's still hinted. Why hinted? Because we want to record that Rivka is dead, and that, when Yaakov comes home, he's not going to meet his mother again. We want to record that. It's sad, but the Torah doesn't want to talk about her burial, her funeral, her death, because it was a little bit of a secret, because of Esau. And people would curse the womb that brought about Esau into the world. Ramban has a very interesting twist on that. He says, I found in a Medrash, Rabbah, that when Rivka died, the people said, who shall go before? Abraham is dead. Isaac is blind. Yaakov is gone. So all that's left is Esau. And if Esau is the one leading the funeral procession, then people will look and they will say, cursed is the breast that gave suck to this one. And so the Hittites bury her in the dead of night secretly. They took her out at night. And of course, Esau is the only one present at a burial, says Ramban. And they fear the curse because he is leading the world, being the only mourner, ostensibly. They didn't want the burial. They didn't view a burial as an honor to her. So it's a bit of ignominious, very sad end to Rivka's life. But what's fascinating is Esau's part of her life. Her husband is blind and cannot leave the house. Yaakov has emigrated. Esau is in the region, and he's the one who's, calling the hospital for the latest news and negotiating with the nurses in the hospital and doing all that the son does. He is there at the very end. The Hittites are not very comfortable with it, and they said this is not reflecting nicely on her, but he's there. He didn't run away and say to his mother, I will never talk to you again. So even though there was a fair amount of resentment, because maybe he didn't appreciate the full depth of what his mother wanted to do. In fact, a couple of lines earlier, Ramban quotes the view that he hated her, but there's still a connection. There's still a bond. He's still part of Rivka's life until the very end. So the simplistic story of the mother who has favorites and who loves the one brother and sidelines the other and betrays him, and he runs away never to speak to her again, it's clearly not that. So let's step back and understand, really based on those powerful words of the Chizkuni I quoted to you before, what it means, she had the best interest of both in mind. Now I'm going to use a phrase from Kabbalah to explain to you the personality of Esau and his essence. And maybe it's very complicated, but it's actually quite simple. Kabbalah explains Esau as being one with lights of Tohu. You remember that from the beginning? In the beginning, God created the world, heaven and earth, and it says there was Tohu Vavohu, there was chaos. Chaos is a spiritual state that the light of the divine goes through before it comes into the next stage, which is called tikkun, or repair, or order. And so there was first chaos in the divine, then there was order. Chaos is when there is too much light and that cannot be absorbed by the vessels. There's too much godliness and it cannot be absorbed by the world, which then kind of breaks. And this is what happened in the order of creation, is that in a chaotic state of divine emanation, there were sparks of godliness that kind of went all over the place, and they're everywhere because they couldn't be contained. And we go around trying to catch those and elevate those. So when you get stuck, without petrol on the side of a highway in the middle of nowhere, and you're waiting for the AA to arrive, and while you're there, you daven mincha, you're busy elevating sparks of godliness that somehow found their way there, going all the way back to the stage of tohu or chaos. It's good because it's powerful, but the world's about order. And Esau has got that unbelievable energy. He's got divine sparks within him that come from a world of chaos. It's not good. It's dangerous, but it has to be harnessed. It has to be controlled. It has to be done and utilized in the correct manner. Esau doesn't know how to do that. And Yaakov's hoping he can somehow harness it, and maybe the blessings are going to help that. We know that Esau has got that unbelievable energy, because even though we speak about Esau Harasha, the wicked Esau, we know that hidden within the progeny of Esau are unbelievable great sages who converted to Judaism and brought those sparks back, released them from the bonds of Esau. The famous Rabbi Meir was an Edomite. The famous Rabbi Akiva stemmed from the nation of Edom. The great sages Shmaya and Naftalion that I mentioned in the Mishnah and in Pirkei Avot, they were the teachers of Hillel and Shammai. They stem from Edom. Ovadia, the prophet, stems from the nation of Edom. And Onkelos Haggai, Onkelos the proselyte, the one who wrote a translation to the entire Tanakh that is printed in virtually every Chumash into Aramaic, is also from a nation of Edom. So there's unbelievable spiritual energy there. But it's chaotic. It's not contained. Rivka wants Yaakov to be Esau's Ritalin. She wants him to be a partner in trying to harness that unbelievable energy, elevate it, and together she wants him to do amazing stuff. And she's hoping that this is what she's going to engineer over here. Imagine, there's a parable about the blind man and the lame man who were appointed by the king to guard some treasures, and they somehow the treasures went missing. The blind man says, I couldn't have done it. I can't see anything. The lame man says, how can you accuse me of anything? I can't even walk. Where would I have gone with the treasures? Of course, we all know what happened. The blind man took the lame man onto his shoulders, and together they walked, and they could do everything because the one was mobile and the other could see, and that worked quite well. So it's that kind of symbiotic partnership that Rivka is hoping to achieve. And she wants Yaakov to be Esau's guardian angel. She wants them to together create a synergy that's going to be unbelievable in what it's going to bring to the world. And so what is she trying to do? She's trying, and she succeeds, in getting the blessing of Esau to Esau via Yaakov. He's going to be the channel. Jacob will physically stand there and receive the blessing, but it's not meant for him. It's actually meant for Esau. And basically, she's tasking Yaakov now with the mission of being he who will look after and channel the energy of Esau for the years to come. Aim, Yaakov, Esau. She's the mother of Yaakov and Esau. And everything she did was out of love for both. Motherly love and, realizing that Yitzchak's plan of blessing Esau and letting him go loose was far too dangerous in terms of the chaotic nature of the divine energy that was who Esau was, and there had to be that relationship. So she appoints him to be the partner for life of Esau, for them together to do amazing stuff. A task which Yaakov takes on. And we're going to see that when they reunite. We're going to have to wait 2 weeks, but not 2 weeks worth of shiurim, just 2 weeks of Torah readings, before we get to the point where they come together again. And this is when Yaakov has been at Lavan, and he's worked there. It was some 34 years, I think, a long time. 14 plus 10, 20, 14 years for the wives and the birth of the children, and Yaakov wanted him to remain beyond because he had put tremendous blessing. He almost kind of kept him hostage until he had to run away in the dead of night, and he's not going back to his father, back to the Holy Land. And then he does something which we find, shocking. He's reconnecting with Esau, and we're thinking, God, what are you doing? I know it's not nice not to have spoken to your brother 34 years, but why doing this? I mean, let sleeping logs die. He's gone. You haven't heard from him. He's moved on to Edom, particularly as your mother is no longer alive. He's probably not hanging around anymore. Leave him alone. Why is he going back? He's going back because he's got a task. He's got the task that his mother gave him, which is elevate Esau, raise up the sparks of holiness that within Esau, bring them out. So what does he do? He apologizes to Esau. He says, I'm sorry it took that long. Now, knowing the relationship, what kind of apology is this? You know what? Yaakov, my brother, I've been fine without you. We haven't had the best of relationships. No, he's got a job. He's got a task. Mom told me I've got to work with you and I've got a task to perform. And I'm sorry it took me that long, but I was with Lavan and I couldn't. And then famously, they reunite. And there's a famous, hug and kiss. And as you'll see in the moment on the word, and they kissed, there are dots to signify that this was a very, very powerful, emotional moment. And whether it was really a kiss of death and Esau intended to bite him to death, or whether he was overcome with pity, there they are. And they're hugging and they're holding together. And the energy that is happening there is not just that of, it's not just brotherly love. It's actually Esau and Yaakov creating that synergy that their mother had hoped for. But before that kiss happens, this is what happens first. And he went ahead. That's because the rest of the family remained behind. Bowed down low to the ground 7 times till was near his brother, and only then did they hug and kiss him. Vayishakehu is the word that means he kissed them, and it's got dots there to say, well, don't take that literally. We need to look at the commentary here to understand exactly the depth of what happened. What was this charade of bowing down 7 times until he reached his brother? This was, Kabbalists explain, the depth of the elevation of Esau and seeking to find the sparks of Kedusha, of divinity that were hidden inside of him. A bit of numerology, and this is courtesy of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, who was the Rebbe's father. He was big into numbers and Kabbalah. And this is what he points out to us. Look at this. Yitzchak, if you look at the numerical value of the word Yitzchak, it's 10, 90, 8, and 100. The total is 208. That is 8 times 26. What's 26? 26 is the name of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. The letters add to 26. So the energy of Isaac is 8 times the name of God. 8's powerful number, beyond nature. 7 is the number of creation, 7 days of the week, 7 days of creation, and 8 takes us beyond that. So it's the supernatural dimension of something which permeates and is beyond. And then we look at his son, Yaakov. And if you add the letters of Yaakov, you get to 182. 182 is also a multiple of 26, but it's only 7 times 26. Where did the 8th gematria of God's name go? Aha. That went Esau's way. Now let's add Esau. Doesn't seem to work, eh? That's not 26. It's Ayin, which is 70, and the Sin, which is 300, and the Vav, which is 6. Doesn't seem to work. Let me tell you what that gematria is. It is 7 times the word Tamei, impure. Tamei, 1 and 40 and 9. So that's 7 times the word Tamei plus 26. So there's 7 layers of impurity of Tamei, and then there is godliness hiding under all of these levels of impurity, because sometimes the holiest, the purest things are very, very hidden and recessed within impurity. And Yaakov, Jacob, has got to find that dimension of divinity within Esau, and that's the borrowing of 7 times before he can reunite with him. That is peeling off those layers of Tamei before you can get to the divinity, the spark of holiness from the world of Tohu, from that world of chaos way up there. And that's the only way that Yaakov can actually unite with Esau and create that synergy, because holiness is so deeply hidden within Yaakov. A final story that'll give us a bit of an understanding of what Esau is really all about. This is some years later. Yaakov is now deceased, and he makes a request that he is buried in Me'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron. And the story of his burial in Hebron is recorded in the 50th chapter of Breshit, in the portion of Vayechi. His sons took him to the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the field of Machpelah, in the cave of Machpelah that Abram had bought from Ephron the Hittite, that was in last week's parsha, as a burial site for Sarah, and it's got 4 double graves. And when Yaakov discovered that Adam and Eve were buried there already, he bought it for himself and Sarah. And of course, one generation down there is Yitzchak and Rivka, who are now buried there. And now it is time for Yaakov to join his wife Leah, who is predeceased him and buried there in Me'arat HaMachpelah already. Of course, his other wife Rachel, she died on the road, and she was buried, as we know, just south of Jerusalem in Bethlehem, in Beit Lechem. So it seems very simple. They went there, they buried him. Here comes Targum Yonatan and says, far from simple. Esau arrives, and he says, wait a second. You cannot bury Yaakov in this plot, because both of us inherited the burial place. There are 2 places left. He's taken one for his wife, the other one's for me. You cannot bury him there. So they argue with him, and they say, no, wait a second. There was a deal. Our father told us that he bought it from you. A part of all the negotiations and the swaps of the spiritual for the physical and so forth, and the birthright sales, there's a document that is recorded, and of course, in the heat of the moment, they didn't think of bringing it with them. And Naphtali, he's called Ayala Shlucha. Naphtali is the gazelle. He can run. He was out of Mitzrayim, and up and down. He comes down and is able to present that document. In the meantime, there is a man called Choshim, who's a son of Dan, and the Gemara tells us he was deaf. He doesn't know what's going on, but all we can see is that Esau is there and is objecting to grandfather being buried. He decapitates him on the spot. The head of Esau rolls into the cave and rested in the lap, in the bosom of Yitzchak. His body is buried outside in the field, and Yaakov, of course, now is able to be buried in the spot that is. And that says it all about Esau, that dichotomy, that double personality. The head, the intellectual part of him, that's in the Ma'at Machpelah. It's connected and linked with his father Yitzchak and his legacy forever. His body, which is the other 7 layers, remains outside the cave, that cannot be elevated, that cannot be brought up. So that's the contradiction that is Esau, and the fulfillment of those very sad words of Rivka, why should I lose both of them in one day? And indeed, Esau died on the day of his twin brother's burial. So there we understand that the complicated relationship between mother and son, which is not a simple one of writing him off and betraying him and forgetting about him, but rather one of love, of concern, and of doing the best that she could for both of her children until the very end. Thank you.